I got bad news for you. You suck at squad because you don't know how to pick a kit, but it's alright because I'm going to teach you. But to start, let's have a hypothetical situation here where we're watching a new player in one of his first games. So he joins a round of Korra, and on this server, there's a defense objective here that the friendly team has a hab on, and the offense objective is over here, and they are trying to attack it. And people are spawning on that hab and moving west. And the new player says, I want to join them. So he joins a random squad. He thinks, what kit looks fun? Let's try this, automatic rifleman. He spawns in, he moves left, and he bipods up on this wall here. Now, what he fails to realize because he's a new player is the situation around him. And at the moment, most of the friendlies are pushed into this compound. It's pretty heavily watched, and the enemy team is spread out quite well with a lot of different sightlines. So predictably, he immediately gets shot in the head. So he goes, oh shit, and he tries again. He climbs to a rooftop, doesn't go quite as far out. But once again, because it's a compound that's being watched by a lot of different angles, with a lot of pressure being put on it, he immediately gets shot in the head. So he says, shit, this isn't working out. Every time I bipod, I die. Let's grab a kit that isn't dependent on a bipod. Let's go with Grenadier. So he picks Grenadier because that's also open, and that seems like it might be a better weapon for the situation. And let's say that as he's doing this, things start to go a little bit better for the team. They start pushing west a bit, and they start getting into these fields. And he's lobbing grenades, he's happy as can be, he's shooting, and eventually they get all the way over towards this enemy objective. And now the situation is reversed. The enemy team is trapped into one point here, they're confined, their movement's limited. He's in one particular area, the rest of the team's all spreading around. There's a lot of fire coming in from a lot of different angles, and the enemy team is essentially being kill farmed. So he sees that there's a couple murder holes on the north side here, and he wants to kill the people in them. So he says, all right, I need something I can shoot into those with, and he switches to Marksman Kit. And he sits here with Marksman Kit and kill farms enemies here. The question I have is, was that a good choice of kits? Oh, and that's the question that we're going to be answering at the end of this video. But let's start by getting into the nitty gritty here. Now I've switched over to Jensen's here, and I want to make 3 main points that are going to help you with kit selection. Right now we're taking a look at the British faction, and I'll get to why in a moment. Now the first point is going to be the hardest one for most people to swallow, and it's going to be the one that is debated in the comments section, but bear with me here while I explain my thought process. And that point is the fact that most of these kits are very similar in terms of combat effectiveness. Now, what do I mean by that? If you play a game like Call of Duty, you're going to have wildly different capabilities in each weapon class. An SMG, a LMG, a sniper rifle, they're all going to behave very differently, and they're all going to have very strong advantages and disadvantages. Squad isn't like that. Most of these weapons are reasonably similar, with some of them having certain attributes that make them better in some scenarios. To give you an actual example, let's start looking at some stats like damage. Now in Call of Duty, you might have an SMG that takes 6 shots to kill somebody. You might have a sniper rifle that'll one-shot them anywhere. But in Squad, from the weakest weapon, which is going to be your short-barreled intermediate cartridge gun, if we're, neglecting pistols here, to your strongest weapon, which is going to be your, longest barrel 308 or 54 rim kind of gun, they're both going to be 2 shots to the body, 1 shot to the head. Their damage is very similar in that regard in terms of actual capability. Now the damage is higher on the 308 guns, and that is going to matter if your opponent's wounded. It's going to matter if a few rounds go into their arms. You're going to kill people faster with a 308. And it does matter beyond 300 to 400 meters. I can't remember the exact beginning of the drop-off for intermediate guns. But for the most part, your capabilities are a hell of a lot more similar for those 2 guns than they are in most games. To elaborate on this, let's look at different stats that are also very commonly used to balance weapons in video games, such as bullet velocity. In this game, 5.56 and 308 have very similar velocities, as they actually do in real life. In fact, 5.56 is higher velocity. Now, of course, that equalizes over range, because the 308 is going to carry that velocity out further, at least in real life. I don't know how well Squad models that, but the point still stands. Both of these guns are around the 800 to 900 meter per second mark. I mean, there's not a lot of difference there. Same goes for point fire. In most games, you have a little hip fire spread box, and that's going to be so much better for SMGs than it is for like an LMG. But in Squad, point fire is just 100% accurate. In fact, if you're clearing rooms in CQB, point fire is excellent. And really the only deciding factor for you is going to be rate of fire, because recoil almost doesn't matter at those ranges. And honestly, something like a medium machine gun with its high capacity magazine, high penetration, and mediocre rate of fire is going to do better than an assault rifle with mediocre rate of fire like an AK-74. And so once again, you can see that these guns can really fill the roles of other guns quite well and quite effectively. Now, this is a lot of explanation, and you're probably wondering, why does this even matter? And that brings us to the second point that I'm trying to make. And that point is something that should be obvious, but I feel like people don't really understand the extent of, and that is the fact that Squad is a teamwork-based game. If you want an immersive, cool, action-packed, realistic shooter, there's a million out there. And a lot of people come to Squad thinking that it's just another one of them. But in reality, if that's what I was looking for, I would not take Squad over Insurgency Sandstorm. I would not take Squad over even Postscriptum. I wouldn't take Squad over Tarkov. Squad just fails to deliver in a lot of situations that you really want a tactical shooter to deliver in. What Squad does give you is the best public team play experience you could really find outside of Project Reality, at least in terms of the style of games. It is so fundamentally teamwork based that if you don't have a team that's willing to cooperate or communicate, you can't even take half the assets out of main. You can't get a spawn within kilometers of the active objectives. It is just a game that is inherently built from the ground up on the basis of teamwork. It really bugs me that a lot of new people get into Squad and they see that teamwork focus and all the promotional material, but they're so desensitized from games like Battlefield 3 using teamwork as a selling point over Modern Warfare 3 that they don't realize that it's more than just a buzzword, it's a core aspect of the game. But this is something that needs to be at the forefront of your mind when you are picking a kit. And no, I'm not just saying, pick medic. I'm going to be a little bit more nuanced with this. What I mean is, if a kit provides a advantage to a squad or a capability to a squad that otherwise is not able to be covered by any other weapon, then that kit is more valuable than a weapon that might technically be a little bit better for the situation at hand. For example, let's say you're clearing rooms and you could take an optic rifleman, or you could take this iron sight LMG. Well, if you're following what I just said with point firing, your immediate instinct might be, oh, the belt's going to be amazing. This is going to be a great weapon for clearing those compounds. I'm going to take that. But what are you missing? You're missing a very important teamwork-based part of this other kit, which is the ammo bag. So basically what I'm saying is, for the entirety of this section, a capability for a squad is more important than a capable weapon for a scenario. Now, this is actually the reason why I chose the British faction as an example, and that's because it has the single best example I've ever seen of a noob trap kit, which is this Marksman Rifle. Let's look at it compared to the optic rifleman. Longer barrel, so it's going to have slightly better accuracy, slightly better velocity, maybe slightly better damage. I think it has slightly favorable recoil, and it has a bipod, which is kind of useful, but in exchange it gets a SUSAT, which is arguably a worse optic. It has ups. It has downs, but at the end of the day, it's still a magazine-fed, 30 capacity, 5.56 rifle with a decent optic on top. These guns are very similar when you actually break them down to their core components, even if one might slightly outperform the other one. But when somebody takes this kit, what they're saying to their squad is, I am purely focused on getting that marginal 2% advantage on my own gameplay, and I don't give a shit about giving the rest of the team ammo. Which segues us nicely into our next topic, which is ammo itself. Things like rifleman kits are going to be fantastic value for ammo. It's only going to cost you 2 ammo to resupply, and you're going to get 30 bullets in exchange. Whereas if you take a marksman kit, that magazine only holds 20 bullets, and it's going to cost 10 ammo to resupply. So that's 5 times the cost for 2/3 of the return. It's not a very good kit to be using if you were low on ammo. And the absolute worst offense that most new players make is if they're constantly swapping between kits to get that slight edge for their current position. If they're thinking, this marksman's not quite cutting it, I do want a GL right now. If they do that in the spawn screen, when they spawn back in, they are going to lose all of the ammo they had in their other weapon. And when they go to a ammo box and click resupply all, they're going to take a ton of ammo away from the fob. Now, you can negate that if you spawn in with a kit you want to switch away from, and then switch to the kit that you want to take, because it will refund some amount of the ammo that you had on your person when giving you this new kit, but it still is not a very economic thing to do, and it is going to cost your team ammo. So somebody who's playing like it's Call of Duty and switching kits between every engagement, because technically this would have been a better rifle for the last engagement I was in, and technically this is the rifle I want to use now for this one, well, they might be costing their team hundreds of ammo over the course of only a few minutes at a single fob. And you get a few people doing this, it can be really devastating to the team. And so now you can apply everything you've learned to this initial scenario we talked about. Now you can actually start to see what the person in question in this hypothetical was actually doing wrong. When they first selected their automatic rifleman kit, the thought process was purely, what kit is good for the scenario right now? What gun can I be using with this current firefight? There was no thought put into what other people had in the squad, what kits might be missing, or what capabilities he might be able to add, which is something that I will talk about at the very end of this video, the actual good kits and where I recommend you start. And then upon selecting this kit, after dying 2 times because of failed bipoding, he thought he needed to switch to GL because he thought he needed a gun that didn't have a bipod. He assumed that because this is a short-barreled M4 and is a bit more wieldy, that it would be better for firing on the move, when in reality, the only real disadvantage you have with the AR is ADS speed, and it's not too extreme. It's something that can be worked around, and he could have stuck with that kit and not wasted a ton of ammo by switching in this menu to Grenadier and then resupplying it in an ammo crate if he had just kept his AR. Eventually that bipod would have come in handy anyway, but he didn't. While he was GL, he moved around and fired grenades with reckless abandon, which is fine, I guess, but if he died and had to rearm, it would have been quite costly. And in the end of the day, right now in squad, you pretty much need to direct impact people with nades to have any kind of real meaning. So in the end of the day, this wasn't that effective. It wasn't too ineffective compared to the other stuff, but it might have not been his best choice. And then his worst choice was when he got to here and decided he needed a Marksman Rifle. This is barely over 100 meters. With his current GL kit, he could have easily camped those murder holes. It has low recoil when you're prone, comparable to the Marksman bipod. The magnification's barely any different, with squad's limited magnification anyway. He could have just done this with his GL. Or, even better, if he had the foresight to stick with his automatic rifleman kit, he could have been in very good condition to camp those murder holes. So now you can see how this indecisiveness and this overvaluing of the actual gun itself has led to a situation where he cost his team a lot of ammo, cost his SL quite a bit of grief by constantly swapping between limited fire support roles, and in the end of the day didn't factor in the need of his squad into his kit selection at all. Now you can see how this person was fairly short-sighted and it was a bit of a detriment to his team, despite only having the best intentions, just because he didn't really understand kit selection. Hopefully now you can go away from playing like this.